Welcome to the Pinoy Nurse Podcast, showcasing inspiring stories of Filipino nurses worldwide. My name is Dion Candelaria, and I'm your host for this episode. So today I'm very excited to have our guest, Dr. Dennis Flores from the US. So welcome to the podcast, Dennis.
Hi, Dion. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast. I'm going to start off hot with question number one. So you have built an impressive career in nursing. And that includes research and education in the US. So, as a Filipino nurse and scholar, how has your background shaped the way you approach work and the communities that you serve?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think in so many ways, I'm very fortunate because I came into nursing as a second degree. I was well into my 20s when I
Mm,
decided to go back to school and pursue nursing. So, unlike the typical narrative of Pinoys who go straight into nursing school at age 16, I was fighting it.
mm,
I didn't want to seem stereotypical. As I was growing up in Pangasinan, and my mom was telling me, you should go into nursing. And I was really fighting it because that was just something that didn't appeal to me at the time. So a decade later, when I finally did realize that there were so many good things going for it, I was a little bit more circumspect, I guess. As an out gay man in my 20s living in Georgia, I figured that my second baccalaureate better be something that was more meaningful for me. And so, I was more cognizant of the fact, for example, that in healthcare, there's a group of people, gay men, who don't receive the best kind of treatment. And so that's where I decided I'm going to go into school, particularly for these folks. These are my people. And let me see, what kind of a career I can make out of it. And so it was from that point of view that, I took all the same classes that our listeners took, their anatomy,
mm.
physiology, pharm, but I was really focused more on what would be of most use to the population that I wanted to serve. Yeah, and I just followed that. I think with a singular focus, I completed an accelerated program. And then when I finally became a nurse, I was really living my best life because these were the folks I wanted to work with. Yeah, and so in the early 2000s, my first career was in a nursing unit with 42 beds dedicated to folks with HIV and AIDS.
Okay,
And so that was like wonderful for me because, it was exactly the group of people I wanted to be hanging out with as part of my day-to-day career. Um, and then out of that, after a few years of really being enmeshed with the population, both in the acute care setting and then in the community, I was starting to get exposed then to eventual issues or processes, and then eventually research questions that
mm,
made me think, okay, we can do better for the care of these folks. And so grad school came following afterwards. It wasn't like something that I was mindful of pursuing, but it was out of necessity for my practice that I was compelled to go into research and then eventually into, as an educator. So I think
right.
this is a long response to your question to
No,
say
no,
that
that's okay.
I think it was following from a place of interest, of passion, that I found myself enjoying myself too much in clinical practice that informed eventual research questions. And then eventually it translated into me being an educator, which I hope, shows up as a motivated faculty member, which has, in so many ways, I guess, contributed to what you're the one who claims success, at least a good career so far here in the US.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So, what was your first degree?
My first degree was from the University of the Philippines in Baguio, and
Okay.
it was psychology and sociology. I had a double major.
Wow. Okay. And I guess building on from that, do you think you were able to use a lot of the psychology and sociology knowledge that you already have into nursing when you did your nursing?
Oh, totally, Dion. Even now, in my full-time work as a researcher, I give full credit to that bachelor's
Mm,
from UP Baguio, my psychology and sociology background, because it is very fundamental to what I do. My research, as you were reading my
yeah.
very long bio, my apologies for that, but it's all centered on family-based LGBTQ health. And so in sociology, we look at the family unit as, as the proximal source of health. And I learned all that from UP Baguio back in the late 90s.
Wow.
And so in so many ways, while I didn't foresee my career turning out the way that it has, I'm really grateful that I started off with a Bachelor of Arts in Psych and Sociology.
Yeah, I'm sure you are, because now when I'm doing my research, I keep like thinking to myself, if I haven't done nursing and I'm doing this type of research that I'm doing now, I probably would have taken psychology because it is so important when we're talking about, behavior and behavior change
Exactly.
and these kind of things. So, wow, great. I guess my second question follows from you kind of touched onto it with your first response is I was wondering, why a focus in LGBTQ plus health and ex inclusive sexual education. Um, and was there any specific moment or experience that kind of pushed you in that direction?
Yeah, I think it was more a collection of smaller incidents, I guess.
Hmm.
Uh, but initially, obviously, as I said, I was a little bit more secure in who I am as a gay man coming
Hmm.
into nursing as a second degree. So I knew at the outset that this is what I want to specialize in. And
Hmm.
then at the bedside, as I said, we had 42 beds, and very typically back then majority of my patients were young men who have sex with men. So these are younger folks in their 20s and in their 30s coming in, quite sick or in varying states of needing healthcare. And at some point, even though I enjoyed it, and that's exactly what I went to school for, it was also exhausting because these were my peers. These were guys in their 20s, in their early 30s. And I used to joke with my coworkers that if our patients were not if I weren't bumping into them at the bedside, they would be my neighbors in Midtown in Georgia, or I'd be at the gay bars hanging out with them. And so why is it that by some twist of fate, they end up as my patients
Yeah.
and I'm the nurse? And I look back to my experiences in high school there in the Philippines. I
Hmm.
remember in high school in Pangasinan, I learned about HIV from my science teacher. And so fast forward to what, 2 decades later, my patients are who they are. And I'm wondering, did they not have a science teacher when they were growing up in Alabama or in Florida who talked to them about what HIV was as a virus and the modes of transmission?
Hmm.
And so, I was having these questions. Um, and then before I knew it, I was conducting qualitative interviews with the guidance of my professor. Um, and one of the things that we learned during that very first study was that as these men in the US were growing up when they were adolescents, they did have sex ed, but they never heard anything about how the content in sex ed applied to them because it was framed in very heteronormative ways. And so the
Oh,
packaging of what HIV is and how it's transmitted, it was all under the guise of penile vaginal sex, for example, right?
okay.
And that's quite useless if you've got a classroom with two or three folks eventually identifying as young MSM. And so I figured, okay, we need to figure out a way then to provide sex ed to a population that needs that kind of framing or that kind of
Mm.
context. And so that's how I ended up really honing in on early and inclusive sex ed that is more family based.
Right, okay. And that makes so much sense, and I personally haven't thought of it like that. I guess my follow-up question to that is you also are you know researching on like communication and sexual communication, inclusive family talks with minority groups, and I guess Filipino community is one of them. I wonder how how um easy or how difficult that is because of the socio-cultural factors um, that you have to consider.
Yeah, I think because I am a Filipino gay man in the US and having multiple minority identities, I'm a little bit more comfortable in having these conversations that are
That's true.
typically stigmatized or generally seen as awkward. So I don't find as much taboo in it because
Hmm.
it's the reality of my life. And
Yeah.
so it's been quite interesting, the research that we've done through the years. I think consistently, regardless of the background of the participant or the family members, there's generally a sense of awkwardness when
Hmm.
parents try to talk to their young person about sexual health. And this is not about LGBTQ specifically, just anything about sexual
Hmm.
health, right? Parents are a little bit more timid or cautious in having these conversations. They have barriers to being
Hmm.
to initiating them. And then young people, for the most part, they also are tuning out their parents. They're like grossed out by this. They're like, la la la, I don't want to
Yeah,
listen to my
yeah,
mom or my dad try to talk to me about the birds and the bees because it's gross.
yeah.
Um, Let me ask you, did you ever have your parents, did they ever try to have conversations with you about sexual health?
No.
Is
And
that something that you were curious about as you were growing up?
well, I didn't even think about it. I don't imagine
And this is exactly, when I start having these conversations, whether it's the parent thinking about when they were an adolescent and how weird or how funny that was, or
Yeah,
now that
yeah.
they're parents trying to figure out how they can initiate those talks. It's
Mm.
all full of landmines,
Yeah.
or lots of funny stories or mishaps. And so, what we try to do in my lab is to figure out, what are the best ways we can help parents initiate very important conversations about health? And
Hmm.
then how can we assist them in framing these conversations so that their children are less hesitant to get
Yeah.
involved in these conversations with them? It's fun.
Kind of
There's a lot
normalizing it
of
too.
trial and errors, but it's very fulfilling too.
Right. Okay. Cool. All right, let's move on. Moving along. Now, so aside from your research, which is very I'm fascinated by your research, and it's definitely interesting. Um, I also know that you're a strong advocate for mentorship among early career, nurses and scholars, and you're quite, generous with sharing your experiences, um, particularly for those from underrepresented backgrounds. So I want to know what you think makes for truly effective mentorship, and how do you try to embody that? How do you try to model that in your work?
Oh, I sometimes I think it's funny when I'm asked about my mentorship strategy or model. Um, And I think it's just a matter of personal dynamics. It's like interpersonal relationships and
Mhm.
just trying to be a decent person.
Yeah, that's the
Um,
core of it, isn't it?
isn't it? Right. Because there are courses that are being taught about how to be a good
Yeah.
mentor, or there are products being sold, there are books out there on this. And I think fundamentally it's really just about how do you best support someone, and whether that someone is a student or a colleague, or, in our case as nurses, they could be patients or community members. What I'll say is that I am grateful that I have benefited from
Yeah.
the help, unconditional help and support of a lot of folks during my early career. And I
Mhm.
think it was the exemplar of having these folks essentially hand me like the golden gate to whatever,
Mhm.
allowing me to do whatever I wanted to do, that really struck with me. These were like pivotal moments, small and big events where I was able to see that if consistently I was able to make a pitch and the other person got it and provided me the keys to the kingdom, I feel like I was able to do things, beyond how the best that I could imagine
You
the
were
outcome to
empowered
be.
to do it. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. That's the perfect word for it. And so it's just a matter of replicating that.
Mhm.
And now that I'm mid-career, I'm able, there's social capital of sorts that I've accrued. And
Mhm.
so if somebody comes to me via email or they're part of my class or whatever, and they have ideas, we can start brainstorming. And it's like, all right, so what are these barriers and how do we just eliminate them? Are they even barriers or are they just things they're thinking about?
Mhm.
And what's the battle plan? How do we then strategize to have you live your best life? And so I think based on these early experiences, um, it's just easier to dismantle, I think, again, all these artificial barriers that get in the way.
Mhm.
That's the model that I have. If I know that you'll work hard on something and you're quite consistent on it, then I'm on board. I'm sold with whatever your effort is,
Mhm.
and let's get going with it.
Perfect. Perfect. I think you've touched on something that, with mentorship and things is not uh overly talked about, and that's the dynamics too. Like, is what you said, there's a lot of products or formula that's being sold, but at the core of it is, two people being decent, but also two people wanting to work together, or there's that
Yes.
kind of natural synergy or chemistry between them. I feel like you can't force mentorship, otherwise it's not going to work because it's so forced. You know what I mean?
I fully agree. And as you're describing it, it's just like dating.
Yeah.
It's been a while. I've been married to my husband for a decade now, so I
Oh,
don't know what it's like
congratulations.
to be. Thank you. Yeah, we're celebrating our anniversary next week.
Oh, wow.
But it's been a while since I was out in the dating scene, but it was a mess. It was just a mess trying to figure out and make things work, right? And I think when we talk about mentoring relationships, yeah, it's trying to figure out, is this person somebody who will help me to the next level, and do they see value in them as well,
Yeah,
investing their time and effort.
exactly. Exactly.
And it doesn't need to be so transactional, though. I think some
Hmm.
of the best relationships I've had are the ones that are just more fun,
Yeah.
that make, the pursuit of whatever effort it is
Hmm.
worth it. Um, there's so much hustle. There's so people are hustling all the time, and
Hmm.
it's so exhausting. And I think the folks that are very transactional in nature, it comes up, it shows up, and
Yeah.
there are like warnings that people get when they encounter folks who are just merely transactional.
Yeah.
So I think hopefully balancing out what your priorities are with the more fun elements
Hmm.
of
I
of
agree.
of life would make for this mentoring relationship to foster and to flourish.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Now, let's change tack a little bit and talk about uh migrant nurses, or, Filipino nurses. And I want to know your thoughts on how Filipino nurses can have or can maintain a sustainable mindset as they move up in their careers.
That's a great point right there, because sometimes I even have to wrestle with this. Like, as I said, I'm mid-career. I'm enjoying my life. I'm actually on sabbatical right now, so
Oh,
it's one of those. Oh, thank goodness, there's a built-in reprieve of sorts,
are you
like a
visiting
sabbatical.
anywhere for your
I
sabbatical?
was a few months ago. I was actually in Asia 3 times in 3 months. So
You should come
I've
to
taken.
Australia.
I should. I even have family there, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, I've had to focus on the research here in the States. But
Hmm.
sometimes I do wonder, how sustainable is this, and how much more gas do I have for the next 20 or 30 years? And I think we owe it to ourselves to think about that, like how sustainable are the things that we do now. But I think the bigger question is, to what ends are we really driving ourselves crazy doing these things? And is it worth it? Or
Hmm.
is it worth pursuing that? I certainly will tell, and I don't know the answer, right, to
Hmm.
what the things are that are worth pursuing. But we do need to challenge ourselves every so often, or at least I do, in thinking about, do I pursue option X for the purposes that I think it will, for whatever it will bring me? Or is there something better or, more to pursue? Um, as I look now on LinkedIn, as I've looked on Facebook, there's so many Pinoy nurses all over the world who are doing wonderful, amazing work, and I'm
Mm,
so inspired by them. Uh, and then similarly, there are so many other folks as well, just pursuing their thing, and I find myself hoping that they don't burn out
mm,
because there's a lot of work that we need to be doing. And so to be part of a rat race that is not sustainable,
yeah.
would just be a pity.
Mm,
So, but I do take comfort in the fact that, yeah, there's so many wonderful Pinoy RNs out there, scientists, leaders. I'm thinking of uh, I'm gonna name drop. I don't know if you know them, but like I'm thinking of Floro Cobello in Finland.
yeah.
There's Anthony Velasco here in Palm Springs. He's gonna be the president-elect of the Association of Nurses in AIDS Care. He's doing fantastic work clinically and with his research. I'm
Right.
thinking about you and your work there in Australia.
Oh, thanks.
It's like it's amazing to me how we've all found our little corners and are
Mm,
working towards, our own research questions or the health outcomes of interest to us. And I just hope that we are able to sustain ourselves for the long run
mm,
because it's a long 30 or 40 years of a career.
yeah.
And I wish we will be able to find ways to sustain ourselves for the longest haul and not just for,
What do you think
uh,
helps in that, I guess, stamina, like in academic
mm,
endurance, um,
yeah,
based
I
on
don't.
what you've experienced so far?
I don't know, and I wish that we had a conversation here. And again, I'm going to name drop, but I'm thinking of Do you know Mom Caster Palaganas? She is based
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
Philippines,
yeah.
and she's the editor-in-chief of the Philippine
She's
Nursing Journal.
she's
I'm,
the president of the nursing research
yes,
organization or something. Yeah.
yeah, and so she was my faculty at UP Baguio when I was
Oh,
an
of course. Yeah.
undergrad. And so now she's been getting so many awards all over the world, and she would be the best person to ask that in terms of like stamina and
I'll reach out to
be being
her.
able to sustain. But I think from her example, one thing I remember from like 2 decades ago, and now that I still know her through Facebook, she has this unabiding commitment to folks that she works with and to the populations that they do research with.
Mm,
And I think those are the strategies that I hope I can uh, I can take from her because thankfully, in my work, I've been doing this for 15 years of family-based LGBTQ work.
mhm.
It's that intimate work with community members that I find most rewarding. So I don't know, how is it for you in the type of research that you do on cardiovascular health? Which part gives you the most satisfaction?
I think for me, not so much satisfaction, but I guess the motivation is the impact, like thinking of what change you can do. How for me specifically, I'm working on patient outcomes and health services research. So how can we make the system work for the majority of people, not just for a certain group of people. So there's that equity focus in, access and to
Mm,
make sure that services reach the population that need them the most. And if we can reduce cardiovascular death by, 1%, then that's also already a big win. So I guess that I guess the North Star that that you kind of look towards making it better for people.
And I love to hear that because you and I have very different research
Mm.
areas that we worked on. But the moment you start talking about your work, there's a different tone that you assume, and then you speak with such eloquence and authority on it. And I think it's us reminding each other. I love the term that you use, your North Star. Um, Being able to remind yourself to what is it that my North Star is, at least
Mm.
for this point, it's perfectly okay to change, right? To pivot
Yeah,
every so
yeah, exactly.
often.
Hmm.
There are so many things that happen in life, but I think having the clarity of
Mm.
knowing that as best as we can. I maybe it's not always the case that we have the most clarity in life,
That's
but
true. And it's also dependent on funding and all the rest of it, as
oh,
you know. Let's not get into that.
have you heard of what's going on in the US? Jeez,
Yes.
exactly,
Oh
right?
my
So funding,
gosh.
all these external
That's a
factors,
new all new
obviously.
podcast altogether.
I know that's exactly it. That's a different episode.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So let's wrap up now. It's very I'm enjoying this conversation, Dennis. And I feel like we speak the same language, even though we've only met today and we come from different research areas and backgrounds and things. Um, but I ask this to all of our guests, and I want to know what is the one piece of advice or wisdom that you'd like to share with, Filipino nurses around the world?
Um, Yeah, I'll take that question and maybe edit it a little bit because really
Yeah,
it's
okay.
more of an advice I want to give myself, and I need to remind myself of this often is I
Okay.
need to get off social media more and I need to stop believing in my own hype. I have a LinkedIn account and I am such a self-promoter. And I think I need to step off that grind, step off that
Yeah.
hustle, because there's so much work out there in my real life. And I'm always on social media, and it takes time from me
Mm.
doing the important work that I know is out there. So my advice is to step back and to just focus on the work or the things that give me satisfaction. There's so many distractions or noise out there,
Yeah.
and I'd like to be a little bit more focused going forward, as a mid-career nurse leader, nurse scientist.
That is such a good advice and something I could probably learn from. But I guess the counter argument is, I guess the system also expects us to do that, like for you to showcase your work.
Hmm.
Um, but then I think that the one thing that I got from your answer is to balance it out, to make sure, do what you need to do, but also don't forget the finer things in life.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it's a challenge that really does present itself, especially for academics, right? Yeah,
mm,
we do need to produce and we do need to have some type of a reputation for which we will be measured when it comes to promotion and tenure and all those other metrics. But again, surely there's more to the career than that, than sustaining a reputation or sustaining uh,
an online presence.
an online presence. There has to be so much more substance,
Absolutely. I
right?
agree. I
And
agree.
so I think that's my reminder to myself at least. I don't have advice for other Pinoys out there because I'm still working on myself.
But I'm sure throughout that conversation you've given us a lot of advice that we could learn from. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This has been fun.
Yeah, it has been fun. So thank you so much, Dennis, for I would call a very honest conversation. And as I've said, I've enjoyed it. It's very interesting. It's good to know you and your work, and where you come from, your passions in life. And I'm sure, as I've said, we'll learn one thing or two in the whole episode. So thank you very much for being our guest.
Have a good one, Dion.
Thanks, Dennis. So stay tuned for more inspiring stories here at the Pinoy Nurse Podcast. And again, this has been Dion Candelaria. Thank you and bye bye.